The NBA made its first debut on Amazon Prime last night, and I took away several things from this debut. I thought their debut was very good, to be honest. And from what I gathered from it was that they're trying to carve out their own niche and be different than ESPN. Granted, now ESPN now has Inside the NBA, but the way I viewed it is that they're not trying to compete with them directly. They're trying to offer a completely different product, which I respect. Just finding your niche is always the right thing to do and knowing what you're good at and not trying to compete with the other product at what they're good at. To me, that's always dangerous. And I think that was part of the reason why ESPN on the NBA sucked for a lot of years because they were always trying to compete directly with inside the NBA. They were always trying to be more funny than inside the NBA by having guys like Stephen A. Smith on there, who is not as funny as Charles Barkley and doesn't compare to Charles Barkley. Honestly, when it comes to comedic chops, he's actually not even likable like Charles Barkley. At least I've never been a fan of his. So I think that was one of the biggest failures of ESPN is that they try to become more tabloid like and not focus really on the sport of basketball, but more so on tabloid stories. To me, that was like one of their biggest failures. Granted, they're still going down that route now, but they have now the Inside the NBA crew, which makes up for them not having a legit crew for a long time because ESPN's crew was pretty much garbage and trashy. Not saying Inside the NBA isn't, but Inside the NBA is like trashy and entertaining. That's why they can get away with what they do. So I just want to throw it out there. But just going back to the Amazon setup, one thing I'll say is their studio is amazing. I love their studio setup. I would say they probably have the best studio out of the three NBA networks when you look at ESPN and NBC. Granted, NBC studio might be just as good because I remember last week they made their premiere on the road, so we'll see. But their studio was impressive. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit biased, but I like the background in one of the areas of the studio where they showed all these iconic large mural pictures of great NBA moments. They had this one large mural, which makes me biased, of Dave Robinson, Tim Duncan holding up their first NBA trophy together, I believe. You know, that picture where they're just standing right next to each other. So that picture is one of my favorite pictures of all time when it comes to NBA history. I'm biased, obviously, because I'm a Spurs fan, so I like that. But I just thought the setup of the studio was pretty cool because it's important to have a good setup. If you notice, even on YouTube, some of the most popular YouTubers have great setups in their background. It just adds to the show, the product, and they have an awesome setup because it makes you wish that you could be there. That's the thing about it. I'm like, damn, this really does look good. So A+ for the setup. Setup was great, was amazing. Now, when it comes to their intro music, I thought it was pretty solid. It was interesting because their music seemed like it was straight out of like the 70s, like it had like a 70s theme, but it works even in today's era. So I would say their intro music was solid. So I'll give them credit for that. I would say it was better than ESPN's NBA music. So there you go on that one. But and then when it comes to the crew, I think their crew is pretty solid, to be honest. And I think their crew can work. I kind of like the diversity of personalities on their crew in the sense that you have Dirk Nowitzki, you have Blake Griffin, you have Steve Nash, and you have Udonis Haslam. And I think their crew could potentially be better than NBC's crew. And I'll tell you why. Because NBC's crew, you have Vince Carter, you have I'm trying to think of who the other people. Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady, Carmelo Anthony, Maria Taylor. And I'll just say with those three guys, just the NBA players, all those guys, I think their perspectives are just very similar in the sense that they were all just high volume scorers. So their perspective on the game is just going to come mainly from just being prolific scorers, and you're just going to have those types of takes coming from those guys. Where I think with this crew, it's different. Granted, Dirk Nowitzki was a prolific scorer, but you have Steve Nash, who was one of the greatest playmakers of all time. So you're going to hear his takes from that perspective, X's and O's. You're going to hear, Blake Griffin was a great scorer too, but he was more like a big man versus being a perimeter player like those guys. So you're going to hear his perspective from like the big man spot of being a power forward and just being this super athletic guy. And then you have Udonis Haslem, UD, who was a great defensive player in his younger days before he was collecting retirement pension funds from Miami. But during his first 10 years in the league, he was an elite defensive role player, very physical, bruiser type of guy, enforcer. So you get to hear it from his perspective. So I think having all those different perspectives makes it interesting. And then you have Taylor Rooks, who I don't expect much from. She's just eye candy, to be honest. But, she's better than Malika. So I'll give her that. She's better than Malika, who I think is terrible on ESPN. So you have all those guys coming together. And one thing I really liked about what they were doing during the show, they were actually breaking down X's and O's. They were going through basketball plays and different types of setups and just even from positions and just talking about those things and how, the teams are running their offenses. This is something we haven't seen in a long time when it comes to breakdown of basketball, actually talking about the game. So, credit to all those guys for just giving their basketball takes, because we haven't seen enough of that, which I commend them for, that they're actually going to focus on the game, which has been lacking. ESPN has definitely not really focused on talking about basketball X's and O's, but these guys were doing it, which I like to hear. I like to hear like Steve Nash's takes, Dirk's takes, those like the way they broke down the game, and Udonis Haslem's takes about defense. There's this one awesome sequence where he went on the basketball court. They have a special basketball court in their studio, which I'm envious of. It looks really cool. It has 2,300 LED monitors from what I read. And he was able to just show how a certain defensive play is set up by having the Amazon NBA crew stand on the court and just designing the play and everything. And the graphics just looked out of this world, awesome. So that was pretty cool. Just seeing these types of takes was amazing. And I think Udonis Haslem is going to be unintentionally funny, because it's like he says stupid things that are funny inadvertently that just makes you laugh. Like he doesn't know any better. So I think it's going to add to the comedic effect of it, where he's not trying to be funny, but it's just like, how can you not laugh at some of the things that he says? Like there's this one sequence in which they were talking about Luka Doncic, and I think it was either Steve Nash or Dirk brought up how Luka Doncic is trying to get Jackson Hayes from the Lakers a passport to play for Slovenia, and then Udonis Haslem looked lost and confused and frustrated, and he interjected saying like, "What's going on here? I don't even understand this. Like you're saying that that guys can change their nationality? I'm confused. I don't understand that. So he could change his nationality." And I just started laughing because it was just it was just too funny. Like, and then I think Nash or Dirk corrected him, and I think they tried not to laugh because it was funny the way he said it. It was funny, and then there was this other time when they were actually interviewing Luka Doncic after the game, and he said to Luka Doncic that you BTA'd the Minnesota Timberwolves. You did BTA on them, and I think Luka may have known what he was saying, or he may not, but it looked like Luka was kind of confused because he didn't understand that slang, which made me laugh. BTA means beat that ass. So just it was hilarious, just that confusion thrown in there. So I enjoyed that, and there was just one part, just when it comes to Steve Nash that I enjoyed, where he was talking to Kyle Lowry about the extinction of true NBA point guards. And they were talking about that. Like, this is like the stuff I like to see, where he brought it up, Nash to Lowry, like, can the point guard come back now? Because we're seeing teams that are actually struggling without legit point guards who are like legit like small guards who are in the range of 6 feet to 6'3", and how those guys are being just wiped out by the game. That to me was interesting. I think, it goes back to just having basketball talk again. And Blake is like that mellow guy on the set, just the mellow guy who, he's come back from the party, who's just wasted, it feels when he talks at times. So it's like there's just like some great synergy going with those guys that makes it interesting, I would say. So I think this crew has potential to be good, like good in their own right when it comes to breaking down the game. They'll never be funnier than the inside the NBA crew, but they don't need to be. I think they're finding their own lane. So, credit to them for the setup, and we'll see how they do as the season progresses. But so far, they started off really well, and that's pretty much all I had to say about this.